When you're new to arm wrestling, you may be tempted to emulate the training methods of top pros like Devon Larratt. However, this approach can be counterproductive, especially for beginners. Devon's training is highly specialized and tailored to his unique physique, experience, and years of building strength. For those starting out, it's much more effective to focus on a solid foundation of basic strength exercises, including wrist curls, pronation work, and compound movements before diving into the more complex arm wrestling-specific lifts. This will give you the necessary strength base while you start developing your own style. Devon Larratt's training, not for newbies. Devon Larratt has developed a specific training routine over many years of arm wrestling, but it's important to understand that his methods are designed for someone with an already massive strength base. After years of pushing his body to extremes, Devon deals with chronic pain in his arms and has even resorted to using stem cells and various recovery techniques just to keep competing. While his training has served him well, beginners should not attempt to follow his approach. At the beginner level, you'll benefit far more from building overall strength through general lifting and conditioning. Lavon Saganashvili, another elite arm wrestler, also emphasizes sticking to the basics. He uses a simple routine with compound exercises like bench presses, pull-ups, and curls. Even after reaching the highest levels of arm wrestling, he remains consistent with these fundamental exercises, demonstrating that it's the basics that help build the strength you need. Skill should come before strength. One of the most common mistakes beginners make is believing that strength alone will win arm wrestling matches. While strength is important, skill on the table is paramount. In fact, skill will often trump strength, especially when you're up against opponents who may be physically stronger but lack technical knowledge. Focusing on technique will give you a huge advantage. Beginners should concentrate on learning proper positioning and movement during arm wrestling practice. By regularly pulling with different training partners who have varying strengths and styles, you'll develop the skills needed to win on the table. Strength will naturally follow as you progress. The role of specific arm wrestling lifts. Arm wrestling specific lifts, such as static back pressure, wrist rising, and static pronation, target a limited range of motion that simulates the starting position of a match. These lifts are beneficial for advanced arm wrestlers who already have a solid strength foundation. For most beginners, however, these lifts will not be as effective as training full-range movements. Exercises like pull-ups, dips, bench presses, and rows are more important in the early stages because they engage a wide range of muscles and help build overall strength and stability. As you progress in the sport, these basic exercises will lay the groundwork for later specialization. Once you've developed the necessary strength and endurance, you can start focusing on specific movements like rising, side pressure, or pronation that mimic the actual combat positions during an arm wrestling match. Top roll and side pressure focus on fundamental strength. Top roll technique. For those using the top roll style, a common tactic when facing a stronger opponent who attempts to go inside is to sacrifice some wrist riser strength and apply offensive pronation. This targets the opponent's fingers, helping to take control of the hand. However, this technique leaves you vulnerable to a counter transition, where the opponent might climb your hand and transition into a top roll. Side pressure. One area that many arm wrestlers neglect is side pressure. This form of strength is critical because it helps you maintain control during matches when your opponent applies pressure in an attempt to pin you. Many beginners avoid side pressure exercises due to fear of injury, but it is an essential and safe form of training that will significantly improve your arm wrestling performance. When combined with strong wrist control and pronation, side pressure becomes an essential tool for any arm wrestler looking to improve their grip and positioning. Pronation and back pressure, the true keys to victory. Pronation is one of the most important aspects of arm wrestling strength. It's crucial for both offense and defense. When you control your opponent's pronation, you gain an immense advantage because it forces them into a weaker position. Bending the wrist and fingers back is not always necessary. Taking control of your opponent's pronation is often the key to victory. Without proper pronation, even the strongest arm wrestlers can be taken down by a competitor who controls the wrist. Back pressure is also vital for preventing your opponent from executing side pressure. If your back pressure is strong enough, it can neutralize side pressure, giving you the upper hand. You'll see elite arm wrestlers using back pressure to gain leverage and counter their opponents. In arm wrestling, if your back pressure is weak, you'll likely find yourself getting driven to the pad despite having a strong hand or wrist. Training for hypertrophy, a focus on forearms and wrists. If your goal is hypertrophy in your pronator teres, the primary muscle used in pronation, it's important to apply the same principles as any other hypertrophy training. That means progressively overloading the muscle over time. Training the forearms and wrists with high volume, multiple sets and varying rep ranges is crucial, as these muscles can tolerate more volume than larger muscle groups. Traditional bodybuilding sets of 10 reps are not always effective for building forearm strength, so a higher volume approach is needed. Remember, the forearm muscles used in arm wrestling can take more damage and recovery than larger muscle groups like the chest or legs. So, training forearms and wrists with varying intensity, volume, and range of motion will help you build the endurance and strength necessary for the sport. Avoid overtraining and injuries. Overtraining is a common problem for beginners, especially when attempting to follow advanced routines. When doing arm wrestling-specific exercises, it's critical not to push to failure, especially in the early stages of training. Going all out in every session will only lead to burnout and injury. Instead, keep the intensity at around 80–90% of your maximum capacity and always leave room for recovery. Even elite arm wrestlers like Devon Larratt avoid maxing out their lifts in training for arm wrestling. Instead, they work within a safe range to allow for consistent progress without risking injury. Building a balanced training plan. To create an effective arm wrestling training plan, you need to understand which lifts target which muscles and how each one contributes to the sport. A well-rounded plan will include strength training, hypertrophy, and arm wrestling-specific lifts. But it's important to identify your weak points and prioritize those areas. Whether it's your wrist, side pressure, or elbow flexors, focus on improving the weakest link in your arm wrestling chain. The rest of your muscles will naturally develop as you continue practicing and competing. Conclusion: train smart, not hard. To summarize, avoid starting with advanced training routines like those used by elite arm wrestlers such as Devon Larratt. Build a solid strength foundation with basic compound exercises, and gradually add arm wrestling-specific exercises once you've developed a base.